Hello, my friends. It's William with the 1921 Diary series. I waited a while because there was some kind of motor running, making background noise. And when that ended, I set everything up, and now we've got this little dog yapping nonstop. Thank heavens it's not one of my dogs. Although, on the other hand, if it was one of my dogs, I could put it in the house or find some other way to keep it quiet. But yes, that's life in the suburbs, and I have to move on to other things, so I can't really delay any longer. So hopefully it will stop before long. And meanwhile, I am passing that misery on to you for us to share together. So apologies for that. So I believe this is part 7, 6 or 7, I think, of the long diary entry of 15th February 1921, which was on the new calendar, the 2nd of March, 1921. And it's a long entry, yes, but it's not as long as Dmitri's typical long entries. And so we only have a few more pages left, eventful ones, but we'll get to that later. I just want to return briefly to what we were talking about in the previous two videos while Dmitri was in Hamburg, and as of today he's no longer in Hamburg, but describing Hamburg and telling us about the feelings that people had toward the Weimar government, and that on the one hand, the ordinary people he met, like taxi drivers, seemed to, just consider it a shoulder shrug. They were pretty indifferent. They didn't think it was going to last anyway, and the whole thing was a little bit silly. But yeah, fine, as long as things were going well. And that on the other hand, his fellow guests, I believe he meant at the hotel, were eager to express their contempt for the Weimar government. And yeah, I have two books that I want to refer to this time. This first one I showed before. You can see the coffee stain on it as well. I've had it for quite a while. Weimar Culture by Peter Gay. He was German, but he changed his name when he immigrated to the U.S. And so he's talking about the feelings of certain strata of the German population towards the Weimar government. And so I just happened to be reading this part of the book last night, and I thought, I'd like to quote this, so bear with me on that. There were thousands in Weimar, professors, industrialists, politicians who hated the Nazis but did not love the Republic. Well-educated, intelligent, reluctant to exchange the values of the empire for the dubious dispensations of democracy, many of these men were paralyzed by their conflicts and pursued through the years of Weimar public careers of honorable impotence, punctuated by fitful activity. They learned to live with the Republic, judged its advent a historical necessity, and respected some of its leaders, but they never learned to love it and never believed in its future. They came to be called rational Republicans, Vernunftrepublikaner, Republicans from intellectual choice rather than passionate conviction. Okay, so that's not talking about the population at large, but it's also interesting, this is some of the language that Dmitri was applying to the high up members of the Russian government, the Tsarist Russian government, as they appeared to him in exile, exactly this way, as men of honorable impotence, punctuated by fitful activity. And yeah, so this title, I'm glad that I've learned this word, Vernunftrepublikaner, because that sounds like a lot of people in my own country at the moment. I don't want to dive into politics, so I need to be careful. But anyway, that just augments a little bit Dmitri's impression of Weimar Germany. And the other book I have with me, Good Lord. All right. The other book I have with me is Corin Hall's book on Kshessinska, her biography of Kshessinska, the ballerina who was the first lover of Nicholas II and then went on to have two other Grand Ducal lovers. And it's a fantastic book. You should look for it. And since today's topic goes back to this ongoing tension between Dmitri and the Vladimirovich brothers and Kshessinska, I thought I would once again show some photographs of, there she is with Andrei. These other photos, well, there's our friend right there at 15, I believe. And the son of that marriage, well, the son of before that marriage with Grand Duke Andrei and Kshessinska. So there they all are, and then we'll return to what Corin Hall has to say about the marriage of Malia and Andrei when we're finished. And now I have to get my dog Duke. Come here. Okay, here he comes. The question is, how long will he stay here? Probably not long. You saw him in the dark the other day. Here he is in the light. Okay, you stay. You stay here. Okay. Interruption after interruption. So, this is being written in Copenhagen, and Dmitri is moving on to the next topic after having told us about his trip to Hamburg, or his stay in Hamburg. He didn't intend to stop there. All right, now I'm going to switch to another topic. Upon arriving here, I received a letter from Shagubatov in Paris, in which he writes that Andrei Vladimirovich has married Kshessinska, and that the marriage was carried out with the absolute permission of Kirill. And the funniest thing, the thing that makes it like a comic opera, is that Kirill has given Malia the title Princess Kshessinskaya. There's no doubt in my mind that the main thing that pushed Andrei toward marrying Malia was the incident that happened in Monte Carlo at the time of our departure. Essentially, I just feel sorry for him, because for him it probably meant a great deal. I remember the phrase he used in a burst of great agitation, in quotes, "Sooner or later I'll end up getting married because I can't live this way any longer, and if Kirill ends up renouncing the throne, the right to it will automatically pass to you," end quote. It was clear to me that Andrei hadn't immediately married Malia only because of career considerations, and therefore she probably ruined his life before leading him to that decision. I personally haven't written anything to Andrei because a letter from me might easily be interpreted as an expression of schadenfreude, though I really just feel terribly sorry for him. Okay, I hope I didn't read that too fast. So Shagubatov, just a quick reminder, was Dmitri's former adjutant, or one of his adjutants. Sounds like probably the main one. And they were reunited in Paris, and though Shagubatov was not then employed by Dmitri, he was sort of voluntarily helping him out with some tasks, and obviously realizes this is big news, so sends Dmitri a letter about it. And I'm surprised that Dmitri found out about it first from Shagubatov, that no one sent him, a telegram or anything, but yeah, good. So one thing that had happened in advance of the marriage is that Andrei, Boris, and Kirill, their mother, Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna the Elder, not to be mistaken for Dmitri's sister, had actually died. And so the way was then clear for Andrei to get married, or rather that was one obstacle that was removed, that it would have upset his mother. So what he needed then was to get the permission of his brother Kirill, and Cyril, apparently gave it wholeheartedly. And yeah, great. But the next thing that Kirill did was to grant Malia Kshessinska the title Princess Kshessinska. Well, let me ask you this, my friends. Can a Grand Duke confer titles? No, absolutely not. And so the minute he granted this title to Kshessinska, he was showing himself to the world without saying it. He was basically, through his actions, proclaiming himself the Emperor of Russia. In exile, granted, but only an emperor or a king or a sovereign can grant titles. So when he did this, it was him showing his hand, so to speak. And Dmitri calls it funny in the sense of humorous, and says that it's like something from a comic opera. And, he would continue to feel that way right up until the moment when Kirill gave his own wife and child, Dmitri's wife and child, the titles of Princess and Prince Ilinsky, and then the shoe was on the other foot. But he never could quite reconcile himself to some of the other titles. For instance, he got used to Princess Kshessinska and Prince Kshessinski and all of these, but he never could get used to the idea that Kirill also made his cousin Gavril a Grand Duke. So Gavril had been a prince of the blood imperial, and Kirill elevated him to the status of Grand Duke. Well, all of these titles were and are bogus in the sense that the person granting them didn't have the right to grant them. There was no throne, and there was no emperor, and so, Kirill just did what he wanted to do. So fine, I think I have no problem with the spouse of a Grand Duke and the children of a Grand Duke being called Prince or Princess, because it's a courtesy title, that's fine, it makes sense. But to say that it's more than that is, that's pushing things. And I personally don't like the fact that Kirill's descendants are called Grand Duke this and Grand Duchess that, because it's just an absurdity, in my opinion. All right, anyway, let's see. Sorry, getting a bit distracted. So there's some bitterness in this section of the diary, isn't there? There was bitterness in Monte Carlo, and there's bitterness carried over from what happened in Monte Carlo. So there are videos about all of those Monte Carlo diary entries going back to the beginning of January. So if you haven't seen those, you can find them on my channel. Meanwhile, in case you haven't seen those and don't know the details, there was a blowout between Dmitri and Maria on the one hand, and Andrei and Malia on the other hand. Maria refused to receive Malia because she was living in sin. She was willing to receive Gavril's wife, who was also a ballerina, the difference being that Gavril and Nina were married, and Andrei and Malia were not. And so it was all right for Dmitri, who was a man, to associate with them, but it was not all right for Maria, who was being very prim and proper at that stage in her life. And Malia was very, very unhappy with this situation, and that made Andrei very, very unhappy with the situation, and he kept trying to push Dmitri into not only arranging for Maria to receive Malia, but also even to get an apology for Maria for having snubbed Malia. And Dmitri was getting more and more agitated about it himself, more and more angry and unhappy. And finally, there was this big showdown on either the day before I believe the day before of his departure, Dmitri and Maria's departure from Monte Carlo. And yeah, so Dmitri recounts what was said there in a burst of great agitation, as he says it, and that Andrei feels that he just can't live that way anymore. And so he, says to Dmitri, well, good for you then, because I can't live this way anymore, and if Kirill does renounce the throne, then have at it. It's yours, in so many words. Actually, Andrei was kind of a squish. He would never have put anything that forcefully. So, and Dmitri was upset. He said he almost punched Andrei. He turned him out without giving him metaphorical bread and salt, so on and so forth. Yeah, watch those videos if you get a chance. So now Dmitri, whether rightly or wrongly, is saying, aha, this is why Andrei has finally decided to marry Malia after dragging his feet. It's 1921 after all. The Vladimirovich brothers came to Western Europe later than Dmitri did, but they've been there for a while now. And the middle brother, Boris, married his mistress. Gavril married his mistress. So Andrei's been the only one who's been dragging his feet. So Dmitri is sort of taking credit, if you want to put it that way, for having precipitated the marriage, whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. And yeah, he's being fairly petty about all of this, and you can sort of feel the resentment reading between the lines. And it probably really is a good thing that he didn't write that letter to Andrei, because some things might have crept into a congratulatory letter that weren't exactly congratulatory. Okay, so this whole idea of career considerations. I'm not, to be honest, sometimes when you're reading diaries, let alone when you're translating diaries, there are certain things that you just don't quite get what the person means. They're writing it for themselves. They may anticipate that people will read it later, but they don't take pains as you would if you were writing a book or an article to make sure everything is crystal clear. So what does that mean? Does that mean that Andrei was actually thinking about maybe being the emperor in exile himself? He never really seems to have had that inclination. So, take it as it is, I guess, career considerations. And then there's this comment that Malia probably ruined Andrei's life before leading him to that decision. So again, what does that mean? Does that mean that she was making his life a living hell? Quite possibly, I guess, until he finally gave in and decided to marry her. I don't know. I thought she was the one who was ambitious and didn't want to marry Andrei because she wanted Andrei to possibly become the emperor in exile, and then he could marry whoever the heck he wanted. I don't know. Clearly, I'm speculating, and if there are any of you out there who are who are better informed, I should say, about this whole mess than I am, please weigh in the comments. Dmitri does not use the word Schadenfreude. That is my translation of the Russian word, although he probably knew that word. But throughout this, he's telling us that the main thing is that he just feels sorry for Andrei. Yeah, okay, I can believe that. It's kind of a spiteful feeling sorry for him, but I don't know. He didn't dislike Andrei, and in fact, they would continue to be connected to each other and in communication, and there was no break in their relationship, really. So now let's see what Corin Hall has to say about. I was really interested, I was really curious to see if Dmitri even came into it, or if any of the things that Dmitri was saying are backed up. But they don't really come up. So let's see. The death of Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna removed the only real obstacle to Matilda and Andrei's marriage. They now decided to marry not only for their own happiness, but to legitimize Vova, who was in an uncertain and very difficult position. So Vova was their son, and he was a young adult at that time. Andrei wanted to marry with the permission of Cyril, who he now considered head of the imperial family. This would make the marriage legal and give Matilda and Vova a proper surname and title. Andrei therefore went to see Kirill, who gave his consent and said he would grant Matilda the name of Kshessinska with the title of princess. Vova would henceforth be a prince. Cyril asked Andrei to return with Matilda immediately after the wedding so that she could be formally presented to Grand Duchess Victoria. So this was Ducky, Cyril's wife and first cousin. That was a messy branch of the family. All right, Andrei also wrote to the most senior surviving member of the family, the Dowager Empress Marie Fyodorovna, who was living in Denmark with her daughter Olga. In reply, he received a kind letter from Olga saying that the Dowager Empress favored the union and wished us a great deal of happiness. So why did not Dmitri hear this from Olga or the Dowager Empress, since Dmitri was in Denmark? I'll have to see if I can figure that out. Immediately after the ceremony, Andrei kept his promise to formally present his wife to Grand Duke Cyril and Grand Duchess Victoria at their nearby hotel. Andrei and Matilda then returned to Copdale for the wedding breakfast. Around the table, blah, blah, blah. I wanted to get this. Let's see. Unlike Boris's wife, Zina, for whom few of the Romanovs seemed to have a good word, Matilda was tolerated by the family. Andrei informed his relatives of the marriage, but many of them were detached and uninterested. Most of them did not recognize Cyril's right to be Tsar in exile and grant titles. Although Andrei now adopted Vova, the titles of Princess and Prince Kshessinska given to Matilda and Vova by Cyril were not considered legitimate by many of the relatives. Okay, I will stop there, and we can see that that's how Dmitri feels about it for the time being, at any rate, and I would assume also the Dowager Empress and Olga and Ksenia. There was not really much love lost between them and the Vladimirovichi. So, now what we have coming up, very exciting stuff. So tomorrow we will talk a little bit about Grand Duchess Ksenia and the Dowager Empress, but in the remaining couple of pages of this shortish long diary entry, we will find Dmitri in the grip of a romance, of the likes of which he had never experienced before, as he is at pains to tell us. And of course, we know he's heading in the direction of a year-long affair with Coco Chanel. So how can those two things quite mesh? Well, I encourage you to continue watching so that mystery can be solved, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye.